In a world where success and accomplishments often take center stage, we can sometimes overlook the small but vital things in life: kindness, empathy, and compassion. These are the forces that shape the world for the better, not just among humans, but across all living beings. Today we bring you a story of one man's simple act of kindness that forever changed the fate of two vulnerable lives. It's a story that will touch your heart, remind you of the power of empathy, and leave you thinking long after it ends. It was a crisp, sunlit morning in Brenton Woods, New Hampshire. A calm day, just like any other. State Trooper Thomas Owens was doing his usual rounds, driving his patrol car down the winding roads of the small town. The leaves had already begun to change colour, the trees now a stunning mosaic of gold, orange and red, signalling the arrival of autumn. Little did he know that this routine morning was about to take a turn that would alter the course of his day and his life. Thomas was cruising through when all of a sudden he felt his hand grip the steering wheel tighter. His foot instinctively pressed the brake pedal, bringing the car to a smooth stop. Around him, the usual flow of traffic came to a halt as well. And there, in the middle of the road, stood an enormous black bear. The creature was calm, unbothered by the bustling traffic, refusing to budge. Its fur was thick, glistening in the sunlight, its massive form blocking the entire road, as if daring the drivers to pass. Now, Thomas had always been fascinated by high-speed car chases. As a young boy, he would rush home after school, glued to the TV screen, watching thrilling pursuits and the law enforcement officers who brought criminals to justice. The adrenaline of the chase, the skillful maneuvers, and the triumphant moment when the officer captured the criminal. It was all so thrilling to him. But as a young man, things had changed. He was now part of the law enforcement community himself, serving his state as a trooper. The exhilarating chases had become a reality, but today, his role would be very different. With a steady hand, Thomas got out of his patrol car, carefully scanning his surroundings. He wasn't quite sure what he was dealing with, but one thing was certain: he had to act. The bear, its large eyes glinting, appeared unfazed by the sudden stop in traffic. The other drivers, impatient and confused, honked their horns, demanding that the bear move. But Thomas, calm and composed, waved them off, signaling them to stay still, urging patience. He knew from his years of training that bears could be unpredictable, especially when they felt threatened. His goal wasn't to harm or scare the creature, but rather to ensure everyone's safety, including the bears. As he moved closer, something caught his eye. The bear wasn't alone. Alongside her, a trio of tiny cubs scurried around, their fluffy fur bright against the green woods surrounding them. Their small, curious eyes darted around as they frolicked in the safe haven of their mother's presence. But there was something wrong. One of the cubs, smaller, weaker, was unable to keep up. It sat on the road, clearly exhausted, its little body trembling as it struggled to stand. Thomas could hear the distant rustling of leaves, the faint sounds of the cubs trying to keep pace with their mother. But this one cub couldn't make it. The poor creature's tiny body seemed to collapse in on itself, unable to rise. It looked up at Thomas, its big, vulnerable eyes pleading for help. He could almost feel its pain, its desperation to move forward, to not be left behind. The mother bear, a figure of power and grace, nudged the little cub with her nose, trying to encourage it to move. But the little one could barely lift its head, let alone follow the others. The mother bear, looking back one final time, continued on her way, walking off the road with her other cubs, leaving the weakest behind. It was a heartbreaking sight, one that struck a deep chord in Thomas's heart. It was then that Thomas understood. The mother bear had made a choice, one of survival. She couldn't risk the lives of her other cubs for one that couldn't keep up. It was a painful decision, but it was the way of nature. The harsh truth of the wild was that only the strongest survive. Thomas's heart sank. He could not, would not, let this tiny creature suffer alone. He didn't think twice. Without hesitation, he rushed over to the small cub, kneeling down next to it. Its eyes barely opened, its small body trembling uncontrollably. Thomas gently scooped it up, cradling it in his arms with the tenderness of a parent. His fingers brushed against the soft fur, and he could feel the weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. The tiny life in his hands needed help, fast. With a sense of urgency, Thomas placed the cub in the back of his patrol car. His heart raced as he started the engine, making a sharp U-turn to head toward the New Hampshire Fish and Game Center. The little cub, weak and barely conscious, clung to life, each breath a struggle. As Thomas drove, he glanced back at the tiny creature, silently hoping for a miracle. It was still so small, so fragile. Its chances of survival were slim, but Thomas refused to give up on it. When they arrived at the center, the veterinarian quickly took over, examining the cub with precision and care. The medical team worked swiftly, taking vital signs, administering fluids, and monitoring the little cub's condition. But despite their best efforts, the news was grim. The cub was premature, far too young to survive on its own. The veterinarian shook his head with a deep sigh, explaining that the prognosis wasn't good. It had a slim chance of making it through the night. Thomas sat there, devastated. He watched helplessly as the little cub lay on the examination table, its tiny chest rising and falling with each shallow breath. The medical team continued to work, but the reality of the situation weighed heavily on Thomas's heart. The little cub's fate seemed sealed by nature's harshest reality. He had tried, but it may not be enough. Yet, as much as he understood the cruel necessity of the mother bear's decision, he couldn't help but wonder if there was more he could do. Was there a chance for the cub? Should he have acted differently? The questions lingered in his mind, but there was little time to dwell on them. Then, as if fate itself were intervening, word came in over the radio. There was another cub, a fifth one, lost in the same area. A search party had been formed, and they had located the cub not far from where the first one had been abandoned. Thomas's heart lifted with a glimmer of hope. He knew the cub was weaker than the first, but it was alive. That was all that mattered. The rescue team arrived, carefully bringing in the second cub. It was even weaker than the first, but it had the spark of life in its eyes. Thomas and his team wasted no time. They fed it, carefully providing nutrients to strengthen its body. They kept the cub under close watch, providing warmth and comfort as it rested. Over the course of the next several days, both cubs slowly started to recover. The medical staff at the center worked tirelessly, giving them the care they needed. Slowly, the tiny creatures began to show signs of improvement, lifting their heads, opening their eyes wider, and even making small attempts to stand. But there was something more. Thomas, despite his role as a state trooper, had become a caretaker in every sense of the word. He spent hours each day checking on the cubs, ensuring they had everything they needed. He held them, fed them, and comforted them. He didn't treat them like animals to be cared for. He treated them like family. He became their protector, their guardian. It wasn't just his duty. It was his heart at work. As the weeks passed, the cubs grew stronger. Their fur became shinier, their little limbs more robust. They played with each other, and their once somber eyes sparkled with life. But Thomas knew that the time would come when they would have to be released back into the wild. As much as he had come to care for them, he understood that the bears belonged in the wild with their own kind. The woods were their home, and it was where they truly belonged. The day of the reunion came all too quickly. Thomas, standing at the edge of the forest, watched as the cubs, now healthy and strong, were released. They took a few tentative steps before disappearing into the dense trees, guided by the same mother who had once abandoned them. This time, however, she wasn't leaving them behind. Thomas Owens had not only saved 2 lives that day, he had reminded all of us of something far greater: empathy. The kind of empathy that transcends species, the kind that connects us all as living beings. And in that moment, Thomas realized that his career as a state trooper had led him to something more meaningful than he could ever have imagined. He had made a difference, not with his badge, but with his heart. It's easy to forget the power of kindness in our fast-paced world. We are often too caught up in the rush of daily life, the demands of work, and the pursuit of success. but sometimes it's the simplest acts of empathy that leave the most lasting impact. Thomas Owen's decision to save those 2 bear cubs reminds us all that compassion knows no boundaries. It's a lesson we can carry with us every day, no matter where we are or who we encounter. Thank you for joining us for this heartwarming story. If it touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe. Tap one of the videos on the screen to continue watching more stories like this one. And always remember, a little kindness can go a long way. Goodbye for now, and take care.